I was transported across time, crashing right into an alpha's engagement ceremony. Yet, instead of tearing me to shreds, he knelt down in public and swore an oath, "She is my queen." Welcome to Luna's Secret Library. On this channel, you can enjoy all sorts of romantic love stories. If you like my stories, please subscribe to my channel for more wonderful tales. The cold, unforgiving wind tore at my simple linen dress. I was falling through a terrifying, endless black void. I did not know how the ancient stone archway in the ruins had pulled me in. I only knew I was falling fast. Suddenly, the suffocating darkness shattered into blinding, flickering light. I crashed onto a hard, incredibly cold stone floor. The impact knocked the breath from my lungs completely. The heavy scent of burning pine, copper blood, and wild musk filled the air. A collective, deafening gasp echoed through the massive space. I groaned, my bones aching as I forced my eyes open. My long blonde hair clung to my sweaty, bruised face. I pushed my trembling body up, trying to understand where I was. Hundreds of hostile eyes stared directly at me. They belonged to towering men and fierce women draped in dark animal furs. This was not my world. This was not the quiet, familiar life I knew. I had landed directly in the center of a massive, raised circular altar. Intricate, glowing red runes were painted on the stone beneath my bleeding hands. A few feet away stood a woman in a sheer, crimson gown. She was beautiful, but her dark eyes were filled with pure venom. She held a silver chalice that dripped with thick, dark liquid. But my gaze was immediately ripped away from her. It was drawn by a magnetic, terrifying force to the man standing beside her. He was a mountain of a man. He radiated an aura of absolute, suffocating power. His broad shoulders were draped in the massive pelt of a black beast. His heavily scarred, muscular chest heaved with sudden, ragged breaths. His strong jaw was clenched tight enough to snap steel. But it was his eyes that froze the blood in my veins completely. They were glowing. They burned with a fierce, unnatural, and terrifying gold. He was looking down at me. No, he was consuming me with his intense gaze. The entire massive stone hall fell dead silent. It was so quiet I could hear the torches crackling. "Intruder!" the woman in the red gown shrieked, breaking the spell. "Kill her immediately, Alpha Caleb. She ruins the sacred mating rite." Alpha. The title echoed in my dizzy mind, ringing with ancient danger. Two heavy guards rushed forward, drawing massive, cruel swords. I scrambled backward, my bare hands scraping against the rough stone. "Wait!" I cried out, my voice breaking with pure terror. "I don't know how I got here." A guard lunged forward, his heavy blade swinging down toward my neck. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable end. A deafening, earth-shattering roar shook the very foundation of the hall. It was not a human sound at all. It was the furious roar of a savage beast. I opened my eyes in shock. The armed guard was gone. He had been thrown halfway across the massive room like a broken doll. Alpha Caleb stood directly over me. His massive frame completely shielded my trembling body from the rest of the hall. His glowing golden eyes were locked intensely onto mine. The murderous rage in them had vanished. It was replaced by something much darker and far more terrifying. It was pure, primal hunger. "Mine," he growled. The deep sound vibrated violently in the center of his chest. The woman in red gasped in absolute, humiliating horror. "Caleb, no. I am your chosen mate," she screamed frantically. He did not even glance in her direction. He slowly dropped to his knees right before me. Even on his knees, his immense size dwarfed my fragile frame. I tried to push back, but my shoulders hit the cold stone altar behind me. I was completely trapped. He reached out slowly with a large, heavily calloused hand. I flinched, terrified of his monstrous strength. But his touch was incredibly, shockingly gentle. He brushed a stray, dirty lock of blonde hair behind my ear. His rough fingers trailed slowly down my trembling jawline. His skin was burning hot against my freezing flesh. Every single nerve in my body screamed in alarm. Yet, a strange, electric heat pooled deep in my stomach. I found I could not look away from those glowing gold eyes. "You smell of rain and sweet, wild honey," he murmured softly. His voice was a dark, rich velvet that wrapped around my panicked senses. "You are meant only for me. Please," I whispered, hot tears welling in my eyes. "Just let me go." His strong jaw tightened instantly. "Never." The single word was a dark vow. It was an absolute, unbreakable command. He leaned in dangerously close. He was so close I could feel his burning breath on my neck. My pulse hammered frantically, beating like a trapped bird against my skin. "Alpha, she is just a weak human," an angry voice yelled from the shocked crowd. "She is incredibly fragile." A low, deadly snarl ripped viciously from Caleb's throat. "She is my true mate," he announced to the hall. His voice carried an undeniable, terrifying authority. "And I claim her. Right now." Before my mind could even process his dangerous words, his hands gripped me. He pulled me flush against his hard, burning chest. I gasped out loud at the sudden, overwhelming contact. He tilted my head to the side firmly but carefully. He completely exposed the fragile skin of my neck. "What are you doing?" I panicked, pushing weakly against his iron chest. "Securing exactly what is mine," he whispered hotly against my skin. Then, I felt it. A sharp, terrifying pain pierced the sensitive crook of my neck. He bit me. He bit me hard. I cried out in shock, my small hands desperately clutching his massive arms. But the sharp pain instantly dissolved. It shifted into a massive rush of pure, intoxicating heat. The strange heat flowed directly from his bite. It spread rapidly through my veins like liquid fire. My vision began to blur around the edges. The strength in my legs gave out completely. He caught me effortlessly, holding my limp body tight against his. The great hall erupted into pure, violent chaos. Furious screams, gasps, and angry shouts echoed wildly around us. But I could only hear the heavy, steady, comforting thud of his heart. He slowly pulled back. He dragged his tongue across his lips, tasting a drop of my blood. The terrifying golden glow in his eyes slowly faded. It was replaced by a deep, striking, possessive blue. He looked down at me with fierce, undeniable protection. "It is done," he declared loudly to the roaring, angry crowd. He swept me up into his strong arms. He lifted my weight like I was nothing more than a feather. I was completely helpless against him. My mind was spinning violently from the intense magic of the claiming bite. "You belong entirely to the Alpha now, my little human," he whispered. His dark voice was the very last thing I heard. As he carried me away from the chaotic altar, total darkness finally took me. I woke up buried under a mountain of incredibly soft animal furs. The blazing heat of a massive stone fireplace warmed the large room. My entire body ached with a strange and exhausting heaviness. I reached up weakly to touch the side of my neck. 2 raised puncture wounds throbbed painfully beneath my trembling fingertips. The sharp memory of the massive Alpha claiming me flooded my mind instantly. Panic flared wildly in my tight chest. I pushed the heavy furs aside and tried to sit up. The room spun violently. I gasped out loud and gripped the edge of the carved wooden bed. Where was the terrifying man with the glowing golden eyes? The overwhelming scent of burning pine and wild musk was everywhere. It soaked the heavy blankets completely. It lingered heavily in the warm air around me. Strangely, Breathing in his dominant scent instantly calmed my racing heart. The magical bond of his savage bite was already manipulating my human senses. I hated this profound loss of control. I had to escape this barbaric nightmare right now. I swung my bare legs over the side of the massive bed. My feet barely touched the cold stone floor before a loud noise stopped me. The heavy oak door to the bedchamber violently slammed open. I flinched and expected to see the giant alpha returning. Instead, the beautiful woman in the crimson gown stormed into the room. Her name was Selena, the proud daughter of a powerful pack elder. She was the woman Caleb had brutally rejected for me at the altar. Her dark eyes burned with intense and murderous hatred. "You filthy little human rat," Selena hissed venomously. She locked the heavy door quickly behind her. I scrambled backward onto the bed as my heart hammered in pure terror. "Stay away from me!" I yelled with a voice shaking uncontrollably. Selena let out a cold and mocking laugh. "You completely ruined my perfect destiny," she snarled while stepping closer to the bed. "I was supposed to be the Luna of this powerful pack today." She raised her right hand slowly. A long, cruel silver dagger gleamed wickedly in the firelight. "Alpha Caleb is currently dealing with the angry elders outside. He cannot hear your pathetic human screams. I am going to cut that filthy mark right out of your fragile neck." She lunged at me with terrifying, supernatural speed. I screamed loudly and threw my arms up to protect my face. I squeezed my eyes shut to wait for the sharp agony. But the horrible pain never came. Instead, a deafening crash completely shattered the heavy oak door. The thick wood splintered into 1,000 flying pieces. A monstrous roar shook the entire stone fortress to its core. I opened my eyes and gasped desperately for air. Selena was frozen mid-lunge with a face pale from absolute horror. Alpha Caleb stood right in the ruined doorway. He looked exactly like a terrifying, vengeful god of war. His broad chest heaved violently with raw and uncontained fury. His eyes were not blue anymore, they burned with that deadly gold. He moved much faster than my human eyes could possibly track. In one single, blinding motion, he stood right beside the bed. His massive hand wrapped viciously around Selena's pale throat. He lifted her entirely off the ground as if she weighed absolutely nothing. Selena dropped the silver dagger and clawed desperately at his iron grip. Her legs kicked wildly in the empty air. "I warned the elders." Caleb's voice was a low rumble that shook the walls. "I warned all of you about touching what is strictly mine." He did not even look at her struggling face. His glowing golden eyes were locked entirely on me. He was checking my fragile body frantically for any signs of injury. "Caleb, please." Selena choked out weakly as her face turned dark purple. Caleb slowly turned his lethal gaze back to her. The sheer disgust in his golden eyes was absolutely chilling. "You dared to bring a blade near my chosen mate," he growled darkly. With a sudden and sickening crack, he twisted his massive wrist. Selena screamed in pure agony as her arm broke completely. He threw her broken body against the far stone wall like worthless garbage. She crumpled to the floor while sobbing and trembling in deep pain. "Guards!" Caleb roared with a voice echoing violently down the stone halls. 2 large wolves rushed into the ruined bedroom instantly. "Drag this filth directly to the dark dungeon," Caleb commanded coldly. "If any wolf dares to even look at my mate again, I will personally rip their eyes out." The guards nodded fearfully and dragged the sobbing Selena away quickly. The room fell completely silent again except for the crackling fire. Caleb turned his massive body back to me slowly. The terrifying rage in his eyes instantly softened into a deep, warm blue. He stepped closer to the bed and his large frame blocked out the light. I was trembling so hard that I could barely breathe. He had just broken a woman's arm without a single ounce of mercy. He was a true and ruthless monster. Yet, when he carefully sat on the edge of the bed, I did not pull away. The claiming mark on my neck burned fiercely and begged for his closeness. He gently reached out and pulled my shaking body into his massive chest. "You are completely safe now, my beautiful Emily," he murmured into my blonde hair. He knew my name without me ever saying it out loud. The supernatural bond was already sharing my deepest secrets with his soul. His strong arms wrapped around me in a tight cage of muscle. I buried my face deep into his warm and heavily scarred chest. I hated myself for feeling so incredibly safe in the arms of a savage beast. "I will never let anything harm you in this world," he vowed darkly. He pressed a slow, possessive kiss directly over his claiming mark on my neck. "You are my queen, and you will never leave this bedchamber without me." The golden sunlight filtered through the heavy iron bars of the tall windows. I had been locked inside Caleb's massive bedchamber for 3 agonizing days. The luxurious stone room felt exactly like a beautiful, suffocating golden cage. Every time I tried to open the heavy oak door, 2 giant guards blocked my path. They refused to speak a single word to me. My modern clothes had been taken away and replaced with soft, flowing white silk. I paced the cold stone floor like a trapped and frantic little animal. The magical bite mark on my neck pulsed with a constant, maddening heat. It was a cruel daily reminder that my body was slowly betraying my own mind. Whenever Caleb was away, a hollow, desperate ache clawed violently at my chest. My logical human mind screamed for freedom and a way back to my world. But my treacherous blood deeply craved the terrifying alpha's rough touch. I could not let this savage beast strip away my freedom entirely. I spotted a heavy silver candlestick resting on the large wooden dining table. I grabbed the cold metal, my small hands trembling with nervous, angry adrenaline. I marched directly toward the heavily reinforced bedroom door. "Open this door immediately," I shouted at the silent, imposing guards outside. Absolute silence was my only answer. I raised the heavy silver candlestick and smashed it violently against the thick wood. "Let me out of here right now." I hit the door again and again until my delicate arms ached with exhaustion. Suddenly, the air in the large room grew incredibly heavy and dangerously hot. A suffocating aura of pure, dominant power rolled thickly into the chamber. The heavy iron lock clicked, and the door swung open with a terrifying silence. Alpha Caleb stepped slowly into the dimly lit room. His massive, towering frame completely blocked the doorway, trapping me once again. His thick chest was entirely bare, revealing a map of pale, terrifying battle scars. A fine sheen of sweat covered his incredibly muscular, tense body. His breathing was unnaturally heavy and sounded incredibly ragged. Those mesmerizing, dangerous eyes were glowing with a bright, terrifying gold again. I slowly backed away, the silver candlestick slipping from my trembling fingers. It crashed loudly onto the hard stone floor. Caleb did not even flinch at the sharp, sudden noise. He stepped forward slowly, moving with the lethal grace of a stalking predator. "You are trying to leave our nest," he growled, his deep voice vibrating with dark danger. "This is not a nest, it is a prison." I yelled back, desperately trying to hide my fear. "You cannot just lock me away from the rest of the world." He stalked closer, his immense size making the large room feel claustrophobic. "The world outside this room is full of enemies who want to slaughter you. I am keeping you perfectly safe, my fragile, beautiful little mate." "I am not your mate," I screamed, pushing my hands against his solid, burning chest. It was exactly like trying to push against a mountain of solid, unyielding iron. A low, savage rumble tore viciously from deep inside his throat. The terrifying sound sent a violent shiver straight down my spine. He suddenly grabbed both of my wrists with one massive, inescapable hand. He pinned my arms effortlessly against the cold stone wall behind me. His burning hot body pressed flush against my trembling, much smaller frame. I gasped as the overwhelming heat of his skin seared through my thin silk dress. His powerful grip on my waist tightened imperceptibly, leaving absolutely no room for escape. "Do not ever say those words again," he whispered dangerously right against my ear. His hot breath sent a violent jolt of electricity straight to my lower stomach. The heavy scent of wild musk and dark pine wrapped around my senses like a thick chain. My body betrayed me instantly, leaning eagerly into his terrifying, intoxicating strength. "The claiming mark on your neck sings directly to my blood, Emily. It tells me exactly how your human heart races entirely for me." He leaned down and trailed his rough tongue slowly over the sensitive puncture wounds. A sharp, intoxicating gasp escaped my parted lips completely against my will. Tears of deep frustration and overwhelming, confusing desire filled my eyes. My mind screamed to fight him, but my legs turned to absolute jelly. The ancient magic of the wolf bond was a powerful, unstoppable drug in my human veins. "You are a monster," I sobbed quietly, hating the pathetic weakness in my own voice. Caleb slowly lifted his heavy head, his golden eyes burning with an intense, possessive fire. "I am your monster, my beautiful girl." He released my wrists gently, only to cup my tear-stained face in his large, calloused hands. His thumbs wiped away my salty tears with a surprising, agonizing tenderness. "And the blood moon rises in exactly 2 days." My breath hitched painfully in my throat as pure, icy dread mixed with the burning heat. "What does that mean?" I whispered in absolute, paralyzing terror. A dark, deeply satisfied smirk spread slowly across his handsome, rugged face. "It means the preliminary claiming mark will not be enough to protect you anymore. During the blood moon, my wild, savage instincts will completely take over my mind. There is absolutely nowhere for you to run from me, Emily. Even if you crossed the oceans, I would hunt you down and drag you back to my bed." He leaned in until his lips brushed agonizingly against my trembling mouth. "In 2 days, we will complete the final, unbreakable mating ritual. I will claim you completely, in every single possible way. I will bind your human soul to my wolf soul forever." My entire world spun violently at his dark, inescapable, and thrilling promise. I was hopelessly trapped in the undeniable gravity of this beautiful, terrifying alpha king. The golden sunlight slowly faded into a cold, terrifying, and merciless twilight. I sat entirely alone on the massive, luxuriously fur-covered bed in the center of the room. Caleb had left the impenetrable stone bedchamber only an hour ago. He was forced to attend a critical, mandatory pact council regarding the dreaded blood moon. Before he left, he had pinned me down and pressed a bruising, wildly possessive kiss against my marked neck. He had ordered me in his deep, commanding voice to stay exactly where I was. His heavy, intoxicating scent of wild pine and dark musk still lingered violently in the warm air. My treacherous, magically bound body desperately wanted him to return through those doors immediately. But my logical human mind knew this was my absolute last chance to survive and escape. Suddenly, a strange, grinding noise echoed loudly from the far, shadowed wall of the massive room. I froze completely, my heart hammering fiercely and painfully against my fragile ribs. A heavy stone panel was slowly sliding open, revealing a dark, narrow, and terrifying secret passage. A small, violently trembling woman covered in a ragged, dirty brown cloak stepped carefully into the room. She was clearly a lowly servant, and her dark eyes were wide with pure, unadulterated fear. "You must come with me right now, human," she whispered frantically, glancing around the empty chamber. "Who are you?" I demanded softly, backing away from her cautiously toward the large roaring fireplace. "I am Alara, and I serve Elder Marcus, Selena's incredibly furious and vengeful father. He wants you completely gone from this alpha territory before the cursed blood moon rises. He truly believes you have bewitched our great, powerful alpha with some dark, forbidden human magic." I did not care what the angry, traditional elder believed about me or my sudden appearance. I only cared about the sudden, impossible, and beautiful sliver of hope dangling right before me. "Can you actually get me out of this heavily guarded fortress alive?" I asked, my voice shaking uncontrollably. Alara pulled a heavy, shimmering, and incredibly beautiful silver cloak from her small woven bag. This magical cloak is woven tightly with pure moon silver and rare, dangerous wolfsbane. It will completely mask your sweet, intoxicating human scent from the alpha's highly sensitive nose. She tossed the heavy, cold silver fabric onto the massive bed right next to me. "Put it on immediately, and follow me quickly through the old, forgotten catacombs. I will lead you directly to the dark edge of the dangerous and cursed Whisper Woods. There is an ancient, forgotten stone archway hidden deep in the trees that leads straight back to your world." My breath hitched painfully in my tight, emotionally restricted throat. This was exactly what I had been desperately praying for during these 3 agonizing days. But as my pale hand reached out to touch the cold silver cloak, an agonizing flash of pain hit me. The claiming mark on my neck burned fiercely like a searing hot branding iron pressed against my flesh. My magically altered blood literally screamed at me to stay in the Alpha's safe, warm, and protective nest. The ancient supernatural bond was trying desperately to physically paralyze my trembling human legs. I bit my lower lip so hard that I instantly tasted the sharp, metallic tang of my own blood. I forced my terrified, trembling hands to grab the heavy silver cloak against my body's violent protests. I wrapped it tightly around my fragile, shivering shoulders, pulling the large, concealing hood up over my blonde hair. The sharp, incredibly bitter smell of the crushed wolfsbane immediately made my green eyes water. But it also successfully dulled the overwhelming, intoxicating, and controlling scent of Caleb in the closed room. "We must hurry right now," Alara urged, glancing terrified at the heavy, reinforced oak door. "If Alpha Caleb returns and finds you leaving his nest, he will slaughter both of us without any mercy." I nodded silently, my entire delicate body shaking with pure, freezing cold adrenaline. I followed the servant girl blindly into the pitch-black, freezing stone passage hidden in the walls. The heavy stone panel slid shut automatically behind us, plunging us immediately into total, suffocating darkness. We walked quickly for what felt like hours through the damp, terrifying, and echoing underground tunnels. Every single scraping sound of a pebble made me think a massive, bloodthirsty beast was lunging for me in the dark. Finally, the narrow, winding tunnel ended abruptly at a rusted, ancient iron grate covering a small exit. Alara pushed it open with all her might, and the freezing, violent night air hit my face instantly. We stepped out cautiously into the massive shadow of the looming, impenetrable fortress walls. The dense, terrifying, and incredibly dark Whisper Woods stood ominously only 100 yards away. "Run," Alara whispered frantically, shoving me roughly toward the dark, twisted, and ancient trees. "Run straight toward the highest, snow-capped mountain peak and do not ever stop for anything. If he catches you outside these protective walls, his wild, feral instincts will completely destroy you." Without saying another word, the terrified servant girl vanished completely back into the dark stone tunnel. I stood completely alone in the freezing, terrifying, and incredibly dangerous wilderness. I gathered the heavy silver cloak in my trembling hands and sprinted desperately toward the tree line. The sharp, unforgiving branches tore violently at my soft silk dress and scratched my bare, pale skin. The thick, freezing mud instantly numbed my bare feet with every single desperate, frantic step I took. But I pushed mindlessly through the blinding physical pain, fueled entirely by absolute, raw terror. I was running desperately for my own life, running away from the savage, beautiful beast who claimed me as his own. I had finally made it deep into the suffocating, silent darkness of the terrifying forest. I actually, foolishly thought I was going to escape his terrifying, completely obsessive grasp. But then, the freezing night wind suddenly shifted directions completely without any warning. The heavy silver hood blew violently back, completely exposing my marked, sensitive neck to the open air. A deafening, earth-shattering, and absolutely monstrous howl violently ripped through the silent, dark night. The terrifying, unearthly sound came directly from the towering stone fortress standing miles behind me. It was not just a howl of anger, it was a howl of pure, devastating agony and lethal, unstoppable rage. He knew. Alpha Caleb instantly knew his deeply coveted mate had just fled his heavily guarded territory. A massive flock of blackbirds exploded violently from the tall trees in absolute, chaotic terror. The cold ground itself seemed to tremble fearfully beneath my freezing, mud-covered feet. The ultimate, deadly, and completely inescapable hunt had officially begun in the dark woods. And the terrifying, heartbroken Alpha King was coming directly and furiously for me. The freezing mud sucked violently at my bare, bleeding feet with every single desperate step. My lungs burned fiercely like they were filled with crushed, sharp glass. The dense, terrifying whisper woods offered absolutely no safe haven for a fragile human girl. Twisted black branches clawed viciously at my pale skin and tore my thin silk dress to shreds. I could not hear anything but the frantic, deafening hammering of my own terrified heart. But then, the deep, ominous silence of the dark forest completely and utterly shattered. A massive, heavy body crashed violently through the thick underbrush far behind me. The terrifying sound of snapping tree trunks echoed loudly in the freezing night air. He was coming for me with the unstoppable, devastating force of a dark avalanche. I pushed my exhausted, trembling legs harder, completely ignoring the blinding physical agony. Tears of pure, raw terror streamed endlessly down my cold, dirty cheeks in the dark. Suddenly, a massive, pitch-black shadow leaped gracefully over my head from the darkness. It landed heavily on the forest floor directly in my only path of desperate escape. The massive impact violently shook the cold earth right beneath my bleeding feet. I skidded to a sudden, frantic halt, my green eyes widening in absolute, paralyzing horror. It was not a man standing before me in the terrifying, suffocating darkness. It was a monstrous, incredibly massive black wolf the exact size of a modern draft horse. Its thick, midnight black fur bristled aggressively along its incredibly muscular, towering spine. The beast slowly turned its massive, terrifying head to look directly and deeply at me. Those glowing, unnatural golden eyes burned with an intense, deadly, and entirely feral fire. A deep, bone-chilling snarl vibrated violently from its massive, bloodthirsty, and open jaws. The deadly white fangs were fully exposed, gleaming wickedly in the faint, pale moonlight. I stumbled backward in pure shock, my exhausted legs finally giving out completely beneath me. I crashed hard onto the freezing, damp forest floor, gasping desperately for any clean air. The massive black beast stalked slowly toward me, entirely blocking out the stars above. Every single predatory step it took radiated overwhelming, suffocating, and terrifying dominance. I scrambled backward through the freezing mud, my trembling hands slipping helplessly on the roots. My back slammed hard against the rough, unyielding bark of a massive, ancient oak tree. I was completely trapped, a pathetic, helpless prey cornered by the ultimate apex predator. The giant wolf stopped mere inches from my trembling, incredibly fragile human body. Its hot, terrifying breath washed heavily over my terrified face, smelling completely of raw power. I squeezed my eyes tightly shut, waiting for those massive, deadly jaws to tear me apart. Instead, I heard the horrifying, wet sound of shifting bones and violently tearing muscles. When I finally dared to open my tear-filled eyes, the giant monster wolf was entirely gone. Alpha Caleb knelt directly over me in his towering, incredibly intimidating, and flawless human form. He was completely naked, his massive, heavily scarred chest heaving fiercely with absolute raw fury. His glowing golden eyes were utterly devoid of any human reason or gentle, forgiving mercy. He looked exactly like a savage, merciless god of the terrifying, ancient wilderness. He reached out instantly with a massive, iron-hard hand and forcefully grabbed my fragile shoulders. He effortlessly dragged me up against his burning, rock-hard, and incredibly muscular chest. "You actually dared to run from me," he snarled, his dark voice vibrating with absolute lethal danger. "You actually tried to hide your sweet, intoxicating scent with this disgusting, poisonous silver trash." His massive hand violently grabbed the heavy silver cloak woven heavily with bitter wolfsbane. With one effortless, terrifying tug, he ripped the thick, magical fabric completely in half. He threw the ruined, expensive silver pieces carelessly into the dark, freezing mud beside us. "No!" I sobbed miserably, watching my absolute last hope of returning home disappear forever. "I just want to go home, please let me go back to my own world," I begged him desperately. Caleb's strong, calloused hands instantly moved to frame my tear-stained, incredibly dirty face. His massive grip was deeply possessive, completely trapping me in his terrifying, inescapable gravity. "You are my absolute home now, Emily," he growled darkly right against my trembling, pale lips. "You are my destined mate, my eternal Luna, and my absolute everything in this wretched life. I would rather burn this entire world to the ground than ever let you leave my side." The claiming bite on my neck throbbed violently, responding eagerly to his dark, dominant words. My exhausted, freezing body instinctively leaned heavily into his incredible, burning, and dangerous warmth. I absolutely hated myself for how deeply I craved his dangerous, protective touch right now. Suddenly, an eerie, completely unnatural crimson light filtered slowly through the thick tree canopy. I looked up to the night sky and gasped sharply in absolute, paralyzing, and helpless horror. The large, glowing white moon had turned a deep, terrifying, and completely unnatural shade of red. The dreaded blood moon had actually risen early, summoned directly by the Alpha's uncontrollable rage. Caleb looked up at the bloody sky, a deep, savage rumble tearing from his powerful, thick throat. The terrifying golden light in his intense eyes completely swallowed the remaining human blue. His feral, wild beastly instincts had officially taken absolute, unquestionable control of his mind. He easily scooped my exhausted, freezing body up into his massive, entirely unbreakable arms. "Put me down right now," I cried out weakly, struggling vainly against his terrifying, monstrous strength. "We have to go back to the fortress," I pleaded, suddenly terrified of being alone in the wild woods. He let out a low, dark, and incredibly menacing chuckle that sent icy shivers straight down my spine. "We are absolutely not returning to that crowded, heavily guarded stone fortress, my precious little bird." He turned completely away from the distant castle and faced the deepest, darkest part of the ancient forest. "The wild beast inside me does not want to claim you gently in a soft, comfortable human bed. He wants to claim you completely in the absolute, primal darkness of the untamed, dangerous wilderness." My heart completely stopped in my chest as pure, undeniable panic completely consumed my fading mind. "We are going right now to the sacred, hidden Alpha's den," he whispered darkly against my frozen ear. "And we will absolutely not leave that deep cave until you are thoroughly, permanently bound to my soul." The freezing wind howled violently around us as he marched deeper into the black, unforgiving forest. Every massive stride he took easily carried me further away from any hope of rescue or salvation. I could strongly feel the terrifying, ancient power of the blood moon radiating directly from his burning skin. His muscular arms held me in an ironclad grip that slightly bruised my soft, incredibly delicate skin. The dangerous, intensely intoxicating scent of wild pine and primal lust completely surrounded my dizzy mind. I was entirely at the absolute mercy of a savage, heartbroken monster who loved me far too much. My desperate, pathetic whimpers were completely lost in the vast, uncaring wilderness of the red-lit night. The terrifying, ultimate claiming under the blood moon was now completely, utterly, and devastatingly unavoidable. We reached the dark, hidden mouth of the ancient Alpha Den located deep within the jagged mountains. The massive cave was entirely illuminated by the eerie, penetrating red light of the cursed blood moon. The air inside was surprisingly warm and smelled heavily of wild earth, crushed pine, and pure male dominance. Caleb gently set my shivering, completely exhausted body down on a massive, natural bed of soft green moss. I scrambled backward instantly, my bare, bruised back hitting the unyielding, rough stone wall of the cave. There was absolutely nowhere left for me to run or hide in this terrifying, primal sanctuary. He towered completely over me, a magnificent, dangerous beast in the flawless, heavily scarred shape of a man. His glowing golden eyes tracked every single terrified, frantic breath that left my trembling, pale lips. The blood-red moonlight danced beautifully across his broad, incredibly muscular chest and heavily corded arms. "Please, Caleb, do not do this to me," I whispered weakly, tears streaming endlessly down my dirty face. My logical human mind still desperately tried to fight the overwhelming, intoxicating pull of the mate bond. He slowly dropped to his bare knees right in front of my trembling, trapped human body. "There is absolutely no stopping the blood moon, my beautiful, precious little mate," he rasped darkly. His deep, rough voice sent a massive, violent shiver of raw electricity straight down my fragile spine. He reached out slowly and gently grabbed my delicate, shaking ankles with his massive, burning hands. I gasped sharply as he slowly dragged my entirely helpless body forward across the soft, damp moss. He pulled me directly into the blazing, suffocating heat of his massive, rock-hard chest. My small hands instinctively flew up to push against his massive shoulders, but my strength was utterly useless. His rough, calloused thumbs gently wiped away my salty tears with agonizing, heartbreaking tenderness. "Do not fear me, Emily," he murmured, his golden eyes completely consuming my terrified green ones. "The final claiming will bind our souls together for all eternity, in this life and the next." He leaned down slowly, and his hot, demanding lips finally crashed violently against my trembling mouth. It was not a gentle human kiss, it was a brutal, overwhelming, and utterly consuming act of absolute possession. I whimpered softly into his mouth as his strong, demanding tongue forced my lips apart without any hesitation. He tasted intensely of wild rain, dark danger, and an ancient, terrifying, and intoxicating power. Every single nerve ending in my fragile body immediately exploded with blinding, agonizingly bright heat. The claiming mark already on my neck burned fiercely, linking directly to his dark, dominant energy. My desperate, pathetic whimpers of protest quickly melted into soft, breathless moans of absolute surrender. My treacherous hands slowly stopped pushing against his chest and weakly clutched his thick, dark hair. He growled deeply into my mouth, a sound of pure, feral victory that violently shook the massive cave walls. His large hands moved urgently down my trembling body, easily tearing away the ruined shreds of my silk dress. The freezing night air touched my bare skin for only a second before his burning, muscular body covered me completely. His skin was so incredibly hot it felt like I was being branded entirely by a living, breathing fire. He broke the devastating kiss only to trail his hot, open mouth directly down the side of my exposed neck. He stopped exactly over the raised, pulsing puncture wounds of his previous, temporary alpha bite. "This will hurt for just a moment, my sweet queen," he whispered darkly against my wildly fluttering pulse. Before I could even brace myself, his sharp, elongated canine teeth pierced deeply into my soft flesh again. I screamed loudly, arching my bare back violently off the soft moss as sharp agony ripped through my body. But just like before, the sharp physical pain was instantly drowned out by a massive tidal wave of pure magic. The powerful, ancient wolf magic flooded my human veins, completely rewiring my entire biological system. I could suddenly feel exactly what he was feeling in his dark, possessive, and wildly loving heart. I felt his absolute, devastating terror of losing me entirely to the dark, dangerous forest earlier tonight. I felt his overwhelming, all-consuming, and entirely unconditional love for my fragile human soul. The profound, emotional revelation hit me so incredibly hard that all my remaining resistance shattered completely. I was no longer just a frightened human girl trapped in a completely terrifying, savage and alien world. I was the chosen mate, the eternal Luna of the strongest, most ruthless alpha king in all existence. I wrapped my soft arms tightly around his massive, muscular back and pulled his heavy body much closer. "Claim me," I sobbed out loud, completely surrendering my entire soul to the wild, unstoppable beast. Caleb roared loudly, a sound of absolute triumph and overwhelming ecstasy that echoed out into the blood-red night. He moved his heavy body forward, finally making us entirely and completely one under the glowing red moon. A blinding, brilliant flash of pure, golden light violently exploded directly behind my tightly closed eyelids. Our souls violently crashed together, weaving tightly into an unbreakable, glowing supernatural knot. The final, eternal mating bond snapped permanently into place deep inside my violently beating heart. There was no escaping him now, not in this magical world, or any other world in the entire universe. I belonged completely, entirely, and forever to Alpha Caleb, the terrifying monster who loved me endlessly. We were locked together in the ancient, sacred rhythm of the wild, driven entirely by feral, untamed instinct. The eerie red light of the blood moon washed over our tangled, sweating bodies in the safe, dark cave. I stopped fighting the terrifying wilderness and finally let it consume my delicate human soul completely. The violent, crimson light of the blood moon finally faded into a crisp, golden morning. I lay safely against Caleb's massive, heavily scarred chest as he carried me through the forest. I was no longer wearing the ruined shreds of my simple human dress. I was wrapped securely in his massive, thick black fur pelt, smelling entirely of his dominant scent. A beautiful, intricate black tattoo had magically appeared right over the bite mark on my neck. It was the ancient, undeniable crest of the true Luna, marking my eternal soul to the Alpha King. I felt incredibly different today, no longer weak, fragile, or terrified of this savage, brutal world. A deep, vibrating well of ancient power now hummed fiercely through my altered human veins. We finally reached the massive, imposing iron gates of the towering stone fortress. But instead of the usual quiet, respectful guards, complete chaos echoed loudly from the massive courtyard. Caleb's glowing golden eyes narrowed dangerously, his massive body tensing for an immediate, brutal fight. He carried me effortlessly through the heavy gates, revealing a massive, heavily armed crowd of angry wolves. Elder Marcus, Selena's cruel and incredibly arrogant father, stood proudly in the very center of the courtyard. He held a massive, wickedly curved silver blade directly against the throat of the trembling servant girl, Alara. "You have abandoned your sacred pack for a pathetic human witch, Caleb," Marcus roared loudly to the crowd. "I claim the Alpha title today, and I will execute this traitorous servant right before your blind eyes." A deafening, terrifying growl violently ripped from Caleb's thick throat, violently shaking the stone walls. He gently set me down on my bare feet behind him, his massive body entirely shielding me from the weapons. "You dare challenge me in my own territory, Marcus?" Caleb snarled, his claws extending fully from his large hands. "I will personally tear your beating heart directly from your traitorous chest for this ultimate disrespect." The terrified crowd backed away instantly, knowing the Alpha's brutal, legendary wrath was a pure death sentence. But as Caleb took a heavy, murderous step forward, a sudden, fierce instinct violently seized my mind. I did not want to hide behind my powerful, terrifying mate like a helpless, shivering coward anymore. I was the eternal Luna of this pack, and this foolish rebellion was a direct insult to my Alpha. I stepped out from behind his massive, protective shadow, standing tall and proud in the golden sunlight. A collective, shocked gasp violently ripped through the large crowd as they stared directly at my neck. They all clearly saw the sacred, magical black lunar crest fully bloomed against my pale skin. Caleb looked down at me in surprise, his golden eyes instantly filling with an overwhelming, obsessive pride. "Let the terrified servant girl go right now, Marcus," I commanded loudly, my voice ringing with a strange, unnatural echo. It was not just my human voice, it was the heavy, ancient, and undeniable authority of the wolf soul inside me. Marcus laughed cruelly, his dark eyes flashing with pure, arrogant hatred. "You are absolutely nothing but a weak human whore, and I will slaughter you right after her." He raised the heavy silver blade high into the air, preparing to decapitate the sobbing Alara completely. A massive surge of pure, dominant magic exploded violently from my furiously beating heart. "Kneel!" I screamed the single word with all the incredible, devastating force of my new soul bond. An invisible, crushing wave of massive supernatural pressure instantly slammed into the crowded courtyard. Every single wolf in the large crowd immediately dropped violently to their knees, gasping for air. Elder Marcus's cruel eyes widened in absolute, paralyzing horror as his own legs violently betrayed him. His knees smashed heavily against the unforgiving stone floor, the silver blade dropping harmlessly from his hand. He tried desperately to stand back up, but the magical lunar command physically crushed his arrogant spine. He was completely paralyzed by the overwhelming, ancient power of a true, fully mated queen. I walked slowly toward the kneeling, terrified elder, feeling completely untouchable in the morning light. Caleb followed closely right behind me, like a massive, deadly shadow entirely devoted to my every move. "You dared to threaten my alpha, and you dared to harm those who actually helped me," I said coldly. I looked down at the trembling, defeated man, feeling absolutely no human mercy left in my altered soul. "My Luna has spoken," Caleb rumbled darkly, stepping up right beside me with a lethal, satisfied smirk. He did not hesitate for even a single, fleeting second to carry out my silent, heavy judgment. With one blindingly fast, brutal swing of his massive claws, Caleb ended the traitorous elder's life instantly. The large courtyard remained absolutely dead silent as the ultimate, terrifying threat was permanently eliminated. Not a single wolf dared to breathe loudly or challenge the terrifying, bloody display of absolute power. Caleb turned his massive, blood-spattered body back to me, his chest heaving with extreme, primal satisfaction. He dropped to one knee right in the very center of the bloody courtyard, bowing his heavy head to me. "My perfect, ruthless queen," he declared loudly, his voice echoing fiercely off the tall stone walls. "My eternal Luna, the absolute master of my dark heart and the true ruler of this savage pack." Following his unquestionable lead, every single warrior, elder, and servant bowed their heads deeply to the ground. The entire massive, dangerous wolf pack was fully submitting to the frail human girl who fell from the sky. I reached out and gently rested my small, pale hand directly onto Caleb's thick, dark hair. The mate bond pulsed beautifully between us, a massive river of pure, unbreakable, and terrifying love. I had finally conquered the dangerous wilderness, and I was exactly where I was always meant to be. There was absolutely no power left in this entire universe that could ever separate me from my beast again. The bloody remains of the rebellion were swiftly cleared from the massive stone courtyard. But a heavy, unspoken tension still lingered darkly in my powerful mate's glowing golden eyes. Caleb carried me deep into the forbidden, crumbling ruins located at the far edge of his vast territory. This was the exact, mysterious place where I had violently crashed into this savage world just days ago. A towering, ancient stone archway stood silently in the very center of the overgrown, forgotten courtyard. Suddenly, a strange, unnatural blue light began to pulse weakly from the center of the carved stones. A cold, familiar wind blew violently through the archway, carrying the faint sounds of heavy city traffic. It was an open, undeniable portal leading straight back to my safe, modern, and completely ordinary human life. Caleb stopped walking immediately, his massive body suddenly turning as rigid and unyielding as solid granite. His incredibly muscular arms tightened possessively around my fragile frame, almost bruising my soft skin. A low, deeply agonized whine ripped viciously from the very bottom of his massive, heavily scarred chest. He stared at the glowing blue portal with pure, unadulterated terror burning brightly in his golden eyes. The most powerful, ruthless alpha king in the entire world was absolutely terrified of a simple stone doorway. He slowly set me down on my bare feet, taking a painful, hesitant step backward away from my trembling body. His massive, blood-stained hands trembled violently as he forced himself to finally let me go completely. The magical rift has suddenly opened again, my beautiful Emily, he whispered, his deep voice cracking painfully. It is calling your sweet human soul back to the safe, peaceful world where you truly belong. I stared at the swirling blue vortex, feeling the cold, sterile air of my old life washing over my face. It felt completely alien, entirely wrong, and unbelievably empty compared to the burning heat of my fierce mate. You have the absolute, undeniable power to walk through that glowing doorway right now, Caleb choked out darkly. If you truly desire your freedom, I will absolutely not stop you from leaving this savage nightmare forever. Tears of overwhelming, agonizing heartbreak instantly filled my green eyes as I looked back at his tortured face. He was giving me the ultimate, agonizing choice to leave him, even though it would completely destroy his soul. The powerful mating bond pulsing violently in my chest told me exactly what would happen if I left today. His feral, wild beast would completely take over his broken mind, and he would eventually starve himself to death. I took a slow, deliberate step toward the glowing, humming portal, feeling the strong wind whipping my blonde hair. A devastating, gut-wrenching sob tore violently from Caleb's throat as he watched me move away from his chest. He fell heavily to his bare knees on the cold, ruined stones, completely surrendering to his agonizing despair. But I did not walk into the freezing, unnatural blue light of my forgotten, boring human past. I stopped directly in front of the ancient, towering archway, my heart beating fiercely with absolute, pure certainty. I turned my back completely on the open portal and looked down at my weeping, incredibly powerful alpha monster. I told you already, Caleb, I stated loudly, my voice ringing with the undeniable, heavy authority of a true Lunar. There is absolutely no power in this universe that could ever separate me from my magnificent, beautiful beast. I walked quickly back to his kneeling, massive frame and gently cupped his handsome, tear-stained face in my hands. I am never going back to that empty, meaningless world, because my absolute everything is right here with you. Caleb's glowing golden eyes widened in pure, overwhelming shock and absolute, unparalleled adoration. He violently wrapped his massive arms around my small waist, burying his face deeply into my soft stomach. He breathed in my sweet scent frantically, crying openly and shamelessly into the beautiful, dark fur wrapping my body. Destroy it, I commanded darkly, pointing a pale, trembling finger directly at the glowing, magical stone archway. Shatter that cursed portal into a million pieces so that I can never, ever leave this beautiful territory. Caleb stood up instantly, a terrifying, incredibly savage roar of pure victory ripping violently from his powerful throat. He did not even bother shifting into his massive, terrifying black wolf form to complete this final, brutal task. He charged directly at the ancient stone archway, his massive muscles bulging fiercely with absolute, raw supernatural power. He slammed his gigantic, heavy fists violently into the glowing, carved pillars with devastating, earth-shattering force. The ancient, magical stones immediately cracked and splintered loudly under his blinding, terrifying, and unrelenting physical assault. With one final, monstrous scream of absolute dominance, he completely destroyed the heavy magical foundation. The towering stone archway collapsed violently inward, sending a massive, blinding cloud of thick grey dust into the air. The strange, glowing blue light flickered wildly for just a second before dying out completely and permanently. The terrifying, loud howling of the freezing modern wind was instantly cut off and replaced by the quiet forest. My absolute last, lingering connection to the human world was now entirely, completely, and permanently destroyed forever. Caleb turned back to me, his massive chest heaving violently, his hands completely covered in grey stone dust. He walked slowly toward me, his golden eyes burning with a dark, consuming, and deeply terrifying possessive fire. "You are permanently trapped in this savage wilderness with me now, my beautiful queen," he growled darkly. I smiled brightly, stepping eagerly into his massive, bloody arms and pressing my lips against his heavily scarred chest. "I am not trapped at all, my alpha," I whispered softly into his warm skin. "I am finally, truly home." Exactly one perfectly peaceful month had passed since the glowing blue portal was destroyed forever. The massive, imposing stone fortress was no longer a terrifying, cold prison to my fragile human heart. It had completely transformed into a warm, vibrant, and fiercely protected home filled with unyielding loyalty. Tonight was the sacred, highly anticipated coronation ceremony under a bright, beautiful silver moon. Every single member of the powerful, massive wolf pack was gathered in the heavily decorated main courtyard. They were not standing in paralyzing fear or angry rebellion like they had done in the dark past. They were waiting with breathless, absolute reverence for their chosen, undeniably powerful human queen. I stood confidently before the massive roaring bonfire, dressed in a stunning, sweeping gown of pure white silk. A heavy, magnificent cloak made entirely of Caleb's shed black fur draped warmly over my delicate shoulders. The dark, intricate lunar crest tattooed permanently on my pale neck was proudly exposed for the entire world to see. Alpha Caleb stood right beside me, looking exactly like a dark, flawless, and devastatingly handsome god of war. His broad, heavily scarred chest was entirely bare, gleaming beautifully in the dancing orange firelight. He did not look at the massive, cheering crowd of lethal warriors standing directly before us. His glowing golden eyes were completely, obsessively, and exclusively locked onto my smiling face. He looked at me as if I hung the very stars in the vast, endless night sky above our heads. He slowly raised his massive, calloused hands and gently placed a heavy, intricate crown of woven silver and dark mountain rubies upon my blonde hair. "I present to you the eternal Luna of the Blackwood Pack," Caleb's deep, dark voice rumbled powerfully across the silent courtyard. "She is the absolute master of my feral soul, and she is the undeniable mother of this entire savage territory. Anyone who bleeds for her will be greatly rewarded, and anyone who disrespects her will be instantly slaughtered." In perfect, overwhelming unison, hundreds of massive, terrifying wolves threw their heads back toward the silver moon. A deafening, beautiful, and absolutely bone-chilling chorus of joyous, submissive howls echoed violently into the cold night air. They were officially welcoming me into their ancient, magical bloodline with absolute, unquestioning devotion. I smiled brightly, leaning my small, fragile body entirely into the immovable, burning strength of my giant mate. The loud, chaotic celebration continued wildly around the roaring fires for many long, joyous hours. But Caleb's feral, deeply possessive instincts quickly ran out of patience for sharing my radiant presence with the crowded pack. Before midnight even struck, he effortlessly scooped my laughing, exhausted body up into his massive, unbreakable arms. He carried me swiftly away from the noisy courtyard and directly up to our heavily guarded, luxurious stone bedchamber. The massive fireplace was already roaring wildly, casting a warm, beautiful golden glow over the soft animal furs. He gently set me down on the edge of the massive carved wooden bed, his golden eyes completely dark with intense, heavy desire. But instead of immediately claiming my waiting lips, the terrifying Alpha King slowly dropped directly to his bare knees. He wrapped his massive, muscular arms securely around my waist and buried his handsome face directly against my soft stomach. I gently ran my pale, trembling fingers through his thick, dark hair, feeling completely, utterly cherished by this savage beast. Suddenly, Caleb gasped sharply, his massive shoulders going incredibly rigid under my gentle, soothing touch. He slowly pulled his head back, his glowing golden eyes wide with pure, unadulterated shock and overwhelming, blinding wonder. "What is it, my love?" I asked softly, my heart suddenly fluttering with a tiny spark of nervous anxiety. Caleb gently pressed his large, calloused palm perfectly flat against my lower abdomen. His massive hand was trembling violently, entirely overcome by an emotion far more powerful than his legendary rage. "I can hear it, Emily," he whispered in a broken, deeply reverent voice that sent happy tears rushing to my green eyes. "I can clearly hear the tiny, fast, and incredibly strong heartbeat of our little wolf growing deep inside you." My breath hitched completely in my tight throat, and a massive sob of pure, overwhelming joy tore fiercely from my lips. A precious, magical new life had already blossomed perfectly from our dark, terrifying, and wildly passionate beginning. Caleb pressed a desperately tender, lingering kiss right against my stomach, worshipping the sacred ground where his child rested. "I swear upon my very soul and the ancient blood of my ancestors," he vowed darkly into the warm room. "I will slaughter entire armies and burn the very world to ash to keep the two of you perfectly safe." He finally stood up to his towering, massive height, easily pulling my sobbing, incredibly happy body into his burning chest. His hot, demanding lips crashed beautifully against mine, sealing his dark, eternal promise with a desperately passionate, breathless kiss. I closed my eyes, fully surrendering to the overwhelming, magical tidal wave of his deep, unconditional love. I was absolutely no longer the terrified, lost human girl who accidentally fell screaming out of the modern sky. I was the deeply beloved mate of the strongest alpha monster, the revered queen of a wild world, and a fierce mother-to-be. This dark, dangerous, and incredibly savage wilderness was never a terrifying prison designed to break me. It was the perfectly beautiful, wildly passionate destiny I had been desperately waiting for my entire, boring life. And surrounded completely by his unyielding strength and undying devotion, I knew we would live happily, and wildly, forever.